The Invincible Legion. The first shots fired in Earth's last war were meaningless. Bullets pinged off alien armor, missiles detonated harmlessly against shimmering energy fields, and artillery fire did little more than kick up dust. Humanity had prepared for invasion, but not for this. The Zyvar Dominion arrived in their towering warships, descending like gods from the void. Their soldiers, clad in adaptive armor and energy shields, waded through gunfire without flinching. Humanity's most powerful weapons barely scratched them. Tanks, drones, airstrikes, nothing worked. Major Ethan Voss, a seasoned sniper, watched it all unfold from a rooftop in Washington, D.C. His rifle's crosshairs rested on the helmeted head of a Zyvar warrior. He squeezed the trigger. A .50 caliber round, the same kind that could rip through steel, struck its target and bounced off like a pebble against a tank. The Zyvar warrior turned, barely acknowledging the shot before marching forward. Ethan's hands clenched the rifle stock. "This is useless," he muttered. Confirmed, came the grim voice of Captain Ramirez, his spotter. "None of our snipers are getting through. They have been positioned all across the city, ordered to slow the alien advance. But the snipers might as well have been throwing stones." Reports flooded in. Chicago had fallen. Paris was burning. Tokyo was under siege. Earth's defenses crumbled in days. The Zyvar were not in a hurry. They marched methodically, their confidence absolute. When humanity fought back, they barely reacted. When soldiers fired, they simply advanced. Their weapons, sleek plasma rifles that disintegrated anything they touched, cut down entire battalions with mechanical efficiency. In the streets below, human soldiers fought and died in vain. The last of Washington's defenders were making a stand, their rifles roaring. But for every 100 bullets they fired, not a single Zyvar fell. Then, Overlord Kryzath himself appeared. The towering Zyvar commander strode into the ruined city square, his armor gleaming under the smoke-filled sky. He stood in the open, unafraid, daring the humans to strike. A general's move, one that declared, "You cannot touch me." Ethan adjusted his scope. "I've got the bastard lined up. Take the shot," Ramirez whispered. Ethan fired. The bullet collided with Kryzath's shield, sending a ripple of energy across the alien's body. The Overlord barely reacted. He simply turned his head, his glowing red eyes locking onto Ethan's position. Then he laughed. A voice, amplified by alien technology, boomed across the city. "Is this what your species has to offer?" Kryzath taunted. "Pathetic." Ethan felt rage coil in his gut. But he knew the truth. Kryzath was right. Humanity had nothing that could stop them. The battle was lost before it even began. And then the slaughter resumed. Kryzath raised his arm, and an energy pulse shot from his palm. A nearby human outpost exploded into flames, soldiers screaming as they were incinerated. Zyvar drones soared overhead, hunting down survivors like insects. Ethan and Ramirez had no choice. They ran. As they moved across the rooftops, avoiding the searchlights of patrolling drones, Ethan's mind raced. The snipers were supposed to be Earth's great equalizer, but they were useless now. Something had to change, because if it didn't, humanity's last war would also be its shortest. The birth of silent rounds. Major Ethan Voss had never felt so powerless. The Zyvar Dominion had turned Earth's best snipers into spectators. He had spent his career believing that one well-placed shot could change a battle. Now, his best shots were less than useless. He sat in a dimly lit bunker beneath the ruins of Washington, D.C., gripping a spent rifle cartridge like a talisman. Around him, the remnants of Earth's military strategists argued over maps and satellite images, trying to plan a war they were destined to lose. "Their shields are too fast," said a scientist from the Advanced Weapons Division, rubbing his temples. "They detect incoming projectiles and repel them before impact. We already know that," a general snapped. "We need solutions, not another damn lecture." Dr. Valerie Kwan cleared her throat. She was calm, confident, and far too young to be the last hope of human snipers. But Ethan had seen her work before. If anyone could crack the Zyvar defenses, it was her. "The problem," she said, tapping a tablet screen, is that our bullets announce themselves before impact. The moment we fire, the projectile creates a shockwave. The Zyvar sensors pick that up, and their shields activate. Ethan frowned. So what are you saying? We make bullets that don't move. Quan smirked. No, Major. We make bullets that move quietly. She slid a file across the table. Ethan skimmed the words. Subsonic, stealth-coated rounds. A new experimental ammunition designed to be fired without breaking the sound barrier, meaning no shockwave, no warning. Regular sniper rounds travel at Mach 2 or higher, Quan explained. The moment they're fired, Zyvar sensors know exactly where they're coming from. But if we fire a bullet under 1,100 feet per second, it won't break the sound barrier. And if we coat it with a stealth polymer, they won't see it coming. Ethan finished, realization dawning. Quan nodded. We can slip bullets past their defenses before they even react. Silence filled the room. Then the general leaned forward. How soon can you get us a prototype? Quan grinned. You're looking at them. She gestured toward a modified sniper rifle beside her. This weapon, paired with the new rounds and a high-efficiency suppressor, will let us put holes in Zyvar skulls without them knowing what hit them. Ethan picked up the rifle. It looked familiar, but there was a sleekness to it, a design made for something far deadlier than anything humanity had used before. He ran a finger along the barrel. This could change everything. Give me a target, he said. The test took place in the ruins of Baltimore, where a Zyvar scouting patrol moved through the rubble, their arrogance evident in the way they walked exposed, unafraid of human weapons. Ethan and his spotter, Ramirez, lay prone on a half-collapsed building. Wind speed low. Distance, 850 yards. The rifle rested steady in Ethan's grip, crosshairs locked on the Zyvar officer's helmeted head. You think this is going to work? Ramirez muttered. It better, Ethan replied. He exhaled, felt the world narrow to the space between himself and his target, and gently squeezed the trigger. A whisper, barely audible, as the suppressed rifle fired. The Zyvar officer took a half-step forward, then stopped. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a thin red hole appeared between his eyes. He collapsed without a sound. The other Zyvar hesitated. They didn't react like they normally did. No alarms, no instant shields. They didn't even realize their leader was dead. Ethan worked the bolt, chambered another silent round, and fired again. Another Zyvar dropped before they could comprehend the first death. Panic spread through the alien ranks. They turned, looking in all directions, but there was no gunshot, no muzzle flash, no warning. Just invisible death. For the first time since the invasion, Ethan saw fear in their movements. It works, Ramirez breathed. Ethan exhaled slowly. Yeah. He adjusted his scope, scanning for the next target. Time to teach these bastards that Earth fights back. The Ghost War begins. The first silent kills were written off as accidents. The Zyvar Dominion had never faced an enemy capable of striking without warning, and at first, they refused to believe it was even possible. Commanders dismissed the initial phantom deaths as malfunctions, rogue human explosives, or simple battlefield confusion. But then, it started happening everywhere. Ghost Squad had grown. What started as a handful of snipers with experimental rounds had turned into a worldwide movement. Snipers, once sidelined in the war, were now humanity's deadliest weapon. They moved through cities like shadows, taking up positions in ruined skyscrapers, forests, and mountains, anywhere they could see without being seen. And the Zyvar? They never saw it coming. Ethan Voss was crouched atop a half-destroyed office building in what was once Berlin. The city had been under Zyvar control for weeks, its human population either wiped out or enslaved. The alien overlords walked openly in the streets, untouchable, or at least they thought they were. His rifle rested against the cracked concrete. Through his scope, he tracked 3 Zyvar officers in flowing command robes, their glowing visors scanning data tablets. He exhaled. 1 shot, 1 kill. He squeezed the trigger. A whisper of air, and the lead officer collapsed mid-step, a clean hole between his eyes. The other 2 froze, confused. They hadn't heard a shot. They hadn't seen a muzzle flash. Their shields had never activated. One of them shouted something in the Zyvar language, panic creeping into his voice. Ethan chambered another silent round. The second officer fell. The last Zyvar commander's arrogance shattered. He turned and ran, barking frantic orders into his communicator. Ethan watched him sprint for cover. Smart, but not smart enough. Ethan fired. The alien collapsed just before reaching the doorway. Seconds later, Zyvar patrols swarmed the area, searching desperately for an enemy that wasn't there. Snipers from other Ghost Squad positions picked them off one by one. No alarms blared. No counterattack came. Just silent death. Across the world, the fear spread. The Zyvar, once an unstoppable force, had no defense against the new human tactics. Their soldiers refused to patrol open areas. Their officers stayed inside fortified bunkers. When they did march, they moved erratically, constantly scanning for threats that never revealed themselves. Snipers weren't just killing them. They were breaking them. Ethan and his team started hitting critical targets, supply depots, shield generators, communication hubs. They starved the invaders, leaving them blind and vulnerable. The Zyvar, for the first time in their history, began to retreat. In a hidden resistance base beneath New York, Ethan watched live drone footage of a Zyvar fortress evacuation. The once proud conquerors were pulling out, their forces loading onto transport ships. "They're actually running," Ramirez muttered. Ethan nodded, but his jaw was tight. Something wasn't right. The Zyvar were too methodical, too calm. They weren't running in fear. They were falling back for a reason. Then, the screen flickered. A new feed popped up. A live transmission. Overlord Kryzath. The Zyvar commander stood on the bridge of his flagship, his expression unreadable behind his helmet. But Ethan heard the fury in his voice. "You think you have changed the tide of this war, humans?" Kryzath's voice boomed through the room. "You think your silent tricks will save you?" He leaned closer to the camera, red eyes glowing. "We have watched. We have studied. And now, we will remind you why we are the rulers of the stars." The transmission cut out. A second later, alarms blared throughout the resistance base. Satellite images flooded the monitors, showing a massive Zyvar fleet repositioning in orbit. The invaders weren't retreating. They were preparing for something far worse. Ethan clenched his fists. The Ghost War had changed everything, but Kryzath wasn't finished. The last shot. Ethan Voss watched the monitors as Zyvar warships repositioned in orbit, their sleek, black hulls blotting out the stars. This wasn't a retreat. This was the endgame. The Ghost War had shattered the illusion of Zyvar invincibility. Their troops were afraid. Their officers hid. Their patrols refused to walk openly. But Overlord Kryzath wasn't beaten. He was adapting. Ethan didn't need the analysts to tell him what was happening. The Zyvar had realized their mistake. They had tried to rule Earth like they had ruled every other world, through brute force. But humanity was different. Now, they were done playing. Global comms just picked up an encrypted Zyvar transmission. A technician called out. "It's a countdown." The room fell silent. Kryzath wasn't going to fight city by city anymore. He was going to wipe Earth clean. "We estimate 6 hours before the bombardment begins," the general announced grimly. "We either stop Kryzath now, or Earth burns." Ethan didn't hesitate. "Where is he?" Quan pulled up satellite intel. "Main Zyvar war base, Eastern Europe, outside Moscow. He's overseeing the operation personally." "Then we take him out," Ethan said. The room erupted in debate. A full-scale assault was suicide. The base was heavily fortified, and every remaining Zyvar soldier on Earth was stationed there. "Not an assault," Ethan clarified. "A sniper kill." The room went silent. One shot, one kill, one chance to save the planet. Ramirez nodded. "We ghost in, put a bullet in that bastard, and ghost out." It was the most dangerous mission they had ever attempted. But it didn't matter. If they failed, there would be nothing left to fight for. Hours later, Ghost Squad infiltrated the ruins of Moscow, moving like shadows through the crumbling remains of a once great city. The Zyvar fortress loomed ahead, a towering structure of alien metal, glowing with the eerie red light of shield generators. Drones patrolled the skies. Snipers couldn't miss once, because if they did, they'd never get a second shot. Ethan and Ramirez took their positions atop a ruined skyscraper, 1,500 yards from Kryzath's command tower. Through the scope, Ethan saw him, Overlord Kryzath, standing on a balcony, surveying the battlefield. He wasn't hiding. He wanted to be seen. "He knows we're coming," Ramirez muttered. Ethan adjusted for wind speed. "Doesn't matter." He inhaled, exhaled, and lined up the shot. A whisper. The bullet crossed the distance in silence. And then, Kryzath moved. The round missed by inches, deflected by a last-second energy pulse. Alarms blared. Spotlights turned toward them. They'd been expected. "Move!" Ramirez shouted as plasma fire rained down. They scrambled for cover. Ethan's mind raced. They had one shot. They missed. Earth was doomed. Then he saw it. The balcony where Kryzath stood wasn't shielded anymore. The energy pulse he'd used to block the shot had overloaded his personal defenses for a few seconds. That meant they had one more chance. Ethan slid into position, ignoring the plasma blasts tearing through the building. He aimed. Kryzath was turning to retreat. He had seconds before his shields recharged. Now or never. Ethan exhaled and pulled the trigger. The silent round punched through Kryzath's skull. For the first time in the war, the Zyvar Overlord fell. The reaction was instant. Across the battlefield, Zyvar forces faltered. Their leader was dead. Their command structure collapsed. Their warships, programmed for strategic retreat in the event of command failure, began to withdraw from Earth. The bombardment? It never came. As the last alien ships vanished into the sky, Ghost Squad exfiltrated, leaving behind a world that still belonged to humanity. Ethan sat on the evac craft, watching the sun rise through shattered skyscrapers. The war wasn't over. The Zyvar would be back. But next time, they would remember the ghosts of Earth.